Well, I tried to keep that as brief as I could.
No, that was good, Randy. The photos were good. So
Thank you so much for giving me an answer to that question.
I'll just let everyone know, it looks like we are recording at this time. So just for everyone listening, I think the meeting will start shortly. I understand the chair of the Board of Supervisors is in the chambers and will be beginning momentarily.
Hello, good morning, everybody. Welcome to our 2021 legislative workshop for the Monterey County Board of Supervisors. It is Friday, January 29th at 10 a.m. and we would like to ask the clerk of the board for a roll call.
Good morning. Let the record reflect all supervisors are present, with Supervisor Alejo, Phillips, Lopez, Adams appearing via video conference, and Chair Supervisor Root Askew appearing in person.
Fabulous. We're just going to do a quick check to see if Marius Castro is on the attendee list. We're not seeing your name, Mario, but if you're on the attendee list and could raise your hand, we can bring you in as a panelist. Mario Castro is the ASB president of North Salinas High School, a student who was planning to join us today to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. But seeing that we don't have Mario present, we will move right along. And if I could ask CAO Charles McKee to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Certainly. Thank you. Please, everyone, join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Appreciate that, Charles. Thank you so much. I would like to ask that our Spanish interpreter please make announcements.
Días, Jocelyn Martínez, intérprete español. Se les avisa que hay interpretación en vivo vía Zoom. Si selecciona el icono del globo abajo de su pantalla y selecciona el lenguaje español, podría accesar eso.
Wonderful. And we do have Spanish interpretation both in the chambers as well as on Zoom. If you're listening on Zoom and want to use the globe feature at the bottom, I believe we also have closed captioning available for our meetings now. At this time, service Spanish interpretation is not available for call-in, and we will continue to work on that. Are there any additions and corrections by the clerk?
There are no additions and corrections. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. And just a reminder to everyone in the chambers, thank you so much for continuing to observe social distancing and wearing a mask while we are in the building. I would like to proceed and welcome our elected officials who are joining us today. We have a number of esteemed local representatives and state and federal representatives joining us. So I would like to just announce that we will have Congressman Jimmy Panetta joining us, California State Senator Ana Caballero, our new welcome to one of our newest representatives joining us again, California State Senator John Laird. I see we have California Assembly Member Mark Stone on the line with us, as well as California Assembly Member Robert Rivas. I believe joining us from Senator Feinstein's office, Zach Valden, and we may also have it a later announcement to announce someone from the office of Senator Alex Padilla joining us. Just want to really appreciate all of our legislators joining us today, spending your time. I know it is, there's a lot going on right now, and we really, really appreciate you taking the time to listen to what we have to share today and to share with us some of what you're working on. Next, I'd like to hand it off to Supervisor Alejo, who is the chair of our Monterey County Legislative Committee, so that he can introduce our legislative team and go over the agenda and our meeting objectives today. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you, Supervisor Alejo, for taking the torch here.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I want to welcome all our elected representatives and their staffs. For those that are joining us, I know Daniel Chen, staff for new U.S. Senator for California, Alex Padilla, has also joined us. I want to welcome him as well. This is our third annual legislative town hall or meeting with our legislators. We started this at the beginning of the year as a way to be able to kind of get all on the same page, talk about priorities, and so that we could be, I think, more successful in our legislative proposal efforts, but also our budgetary efforts. And I think over the last 3 years, we've been able to work with all our legislative representatives in Sacramento and at the federal level to, I think, really do some good work for the people of Monterey County. So I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us here today. We are going to have some brief presentations, first by our staff, secondly, hear from our federal and state representatives, and then move into comments by my colleagues on the Board of Supervisors, and lastly, end in a discussion. And at the end, we will have some time for public comment as well. But I think over the last 3 or 4 years, I think with our collaboration and teamwork, we've been successful at some of the priorities that we talked about each year. But I first want to introduce our county legislative team. We have Nick Chulos, who's our assistant CAO. Secondly, Annette Diadamo, our legislative coordinator. Take it away there. In Sacramento, Ashley Walker is our state legislative advocate with Nossaman LLP. Also does a lot of our grant work as also. And lastly, we have Brent Heberly, our federal legislative advocate with Ballard Spahr LLP in Washington, D.C. Thank you for being here. And they'll be speaking in just a bit. Also, we want to ask our presenters to please be brief on time. I know we have a limited schedule here today. We want to get through it all and also leave time for discussion at the end. So I'm going to just keep moving on here. I'm going to introduce our county CAO, Charles McKee, who will start things off and go into our staff presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Alejo, and as chair of the Legislative Committee, and Chair Wendy Root Askew, assuming her new role as chair of the Board of Supervisors. As a new supervisor, I appreciate you bringing us, starting us off here this morning, and obviously thanking all the legislators who have joined us. As Supervisor Alejo alluded to, this is a partnership that with our legislators that we think is a way to build success and a way to have a constant communication between us and our representatives at the state level and the federal level, so that we can jointly provide services to our community. The themes of today are obviously overshadowed by some of the bigger issues that we're all dealing with. COVID-19 is obviously the big one, and because we have famine and feast here in California, we have our disasters happening recently with fires, and now a lot of landslides and floods and those kinds of things associated with the recent rains that we all wanted to see and all are appreciative to have, but we'd like them to be a little more spread out. And so those overarching issues of COVID-19 and disasters kind of set the stage for how we're looking at today and looking at trying to build partnerships with you at the federal level and the state level to talk about some specifics that we have here today on our agenda and how they might lead us towards economic recovery and some of the issues that will flow to out of as we move out of the pandemic and as we move towards the next phase and showing the resiliency that we have. So what a big thing for us locally, and I know you're all aware of this, is getting the state and federal support for what we need, and a lot of that is to get it directly. As it gets diverted out in these federal and state levels, where it goes through different programs here and there, and there, I don't want to say it, but it seems to be some of it gets diverted about or diluted before it gets to the county. And the more we can have that direct federal and state support to us, we can put it into use quickly. We know that we have the ability to do that. We know we have the partners here on the ground to do that. So what we're looking is to get your support in getting the direct fiscal relief to counties that we need, because we have, we know the state's feeling this and the federal government's feeling it too, but we have declining revenues and increasing expenses. And we know that you're aware of that. And we just want to reemphasize those needs. Now, if you can move to the next. Yeah, Maddie, okay to move? There we go. Thank you, Nat. So the economic relief and recovery that we're looking for here is to look at some of the support that we want. We know you're aware of it, is expanding the sick leave and income replacement that the families need on the ground, because when you put money into the pockets of the needy people, they spend it immediately. They help their families. They get it into the economy. We know that that's a proven method of helping the economy and helping people at the same time. So we want that support to, we understand that it's hard to do bills that can address the big needs, but we think focusing on the people that need it will help them directly and will help the economy at the same time. So we want you to focus on that at the state and federal level if you can. We know that the next couple of things, the safe housing is critical to helping stem the tide of COVID. And the more that you can make sure that that's happening, we had some great success early on, and there have been some more recent challenges recognizing whether the funding is going to continue for the isolation programs that we have. The Homes for Harvest is a great idea. We want to keep pushing that. And the other recovery efforts for having housing for people that need it. Expanding the stimulus payments to the people that need it is right up there. The low-income families need that help directly. We know you've already worked on the eviction moratorium extension, but we also want to make sure that there are grants to landlords and rent forgiveness. We know that that's key. And we're not talking about the big wealthy landlords that have the ability to withstand the economic downturns. We're talking about the mom and pops who use this as a way to help with their retirement, and it helps with the renters who are staying in those places. And then finally, small business relief grants. We did a program here, pilot program here locally that was really successful, and it gets the money into those small businesses that we know are the lifeblood. The big guys, that everybody hears about are really a small percentage of the employers in California and the state, and the nation. So funding the small businesses with grants is really key to making the recovery and having a resiliency so to help us move forward. So you're going to hear presentations today from our staff, and we appreciate everybody listening and being a partner. We wanted to let you know that we have partners throughout the whole county in fighting the vaccine, and we'll talk about Elsa Jimenez, our Director of Health. We'll talk about that real briefly. And we know that that's a big piece in the success in beating COVID-19. And we're going to keep stressing the private businesses, the ag community, hospitality, as well as some of our non-governmental entities. COPA you'll hear about, our community health worker program you'll hear about. Those are things that are going to help us all move forward. So thank you again, and we appreciate the partnership that we have with both our state and federal representatives.
Good morning. As Charles mentioned, I'm Elsa Jimenez, the Health Director for Monterey County, and I have a couple of slides that I'm going to present to you. We know who the most vulnerable in our county are with respect to experiencing greatest impact from COVID. And among the highest priorities for our county and our residents is to make sure that COVID-19 vaccines are made available to the most vulnerable populations and as quickly as possible. We want to ensure that vaccine distribution is allocated using a health equity lens and prioritizing those groups at higher risk of exposure and those at highest risk of developing serious illness and death. Individuals 75 years of age and older are 200 to 630 times more likely to die from COVID compared to 18 to 29-year-olds. Additionally, our frontline workers in the ag and food sector are disproportionately impacted, as was noted during our peak season last year, in which approximately 40% of our cases were employed in this sector. Based on the current weekly allocation that Monterey County receives of 2,000 to 4,000 doses, and if we dedicated 100% of these doses to a specific group, it would take us 19 weeks to administer one dose to the approximately 39,000 residents aged 75 and older, and another 47 weeks to administer one dose to the approximately 94,000 individuals employed in the ag and food sector. With the imminent start of the growth season in our county, it is imperative our weekly allocation of doses increases significantly so that we can vaccinate our approximately 34,000 essential agricultural workers, including approximately 35,000 that will be migrating into our county in the coming weeks. And many of these individuals will be migrating from Yuma, which is currently considered a hotspot for COVID in America. We need immediate action in establishing FEMA-supported mass vaccination clinics in our county to ensure that COVID doesn't continue to disproportionately impact our Latinx residents. Next slide. Another thing that we have learned from this pandemic is the lack of adequate ongoing funding for our public health infrastructure. Investments in public health were 2 times per capita more than they are now 2 decades ago. Over time, we have seen a shift of investing from the public health area into the healthcare delivery system. Recently, our joint state associations put together a collective budget ask to be able to support existing pandemic response efforts and to continue to invest in our core public health infrastructure. The budget ask was approximately $1.2 billion, and $50 million of that is to support local health departments in California to have adequate staffing levels to meet existing public health challenges and be able to ramp up in case there is a future pandemic. And with that, I'll hand it off to the next speaker.
Thank you, Elsa. Good morning. I'm Lori Medina. I'm the Director of Social Services here in Monterey County, and I have a couple of highlights for you that are also contained in your packet. Currently, right now, HUD requires jurisdictions to conduct point-in-time counts every other year to determine whether or who we will allocate funding to the scope of funding based on what we can observe in one night of the year of people who are unsheltered or experiencing homelessness. Our last point in time count was in January of 2019, and it just happened to occur on one of the worst, coldest, and rainiest nights of the year. And so for a variety of reasons, we actually think that even though we had a high proportion of those experiencing homelessness, we actually think that the numbers are much larger than what we were able to ascertain in 2019. This year would have been our 2021 point in time count during this month, one day of the year, to conduct another count. But because of the pandemic and the conditions under which we would have to be able to do that count, that has to be delayed. So one of the things that we are wanting is to just ensure that you support a fair and equitable way to calculate and distribute state and federal funding to jurisdictions so we can provide services to all homeless populations. Next slide. Okay, outside of HUD, we've seen various relief packages around supportive housing, proposals or programs to be implemented to support services for persons experiencing hopelessness or who are housing insecure. That necessitates not only case management, but also behavioral and health supports, transitional and supportive housing, and barrier remediation. We were pleased to be able to apply directly this year to the Department of Treasury as a recipient of the Federal Emergency Rental and Utility Assistance Program and ask for your support to expand and increase such opportunities. We would also like to get support to remove some of the restrictions such as residence requirements. As we know, in Monterey County, we have a large migrant population. We have people who come here, contribute to the economy, and may not be residents, but however, they are still a part of our community, and we feel like we need to serve them as well. We also ask for your support to increase student homeless funding under the McKinney-Vento Act. As our last point in time count reflected, we have a high rate of students experiencing homelessness and housing vulnerability. About 14% of those observed to be homeless were under the age of 18. And then finally, we ask your support to approve the homeless resources contained in the governor's proposed budget, which you'll hear a little bit more about that from Melanie. That'll really help with our housing infrastructure needs. And with that, I'll turn it over to our next speaker.
Hello, I'm, excuse me, Melanie Beretti with the Housing and Community Development Department here at Monterey County. As you've heard, there's an extreme need for housing and supportive services in the county, and state and federal programs, as you know, are vital to that. In particular, here in Monterey County, some of the key issues that we really need to address are keeping focus on making rental affordable housing options available and addressing the housing for special need populations, such as farm workers and their families. You know, we have extreme overcrowding and extreme risk of homelessness for our populations that we need to address. Overall, the ask is for both the state and federal levels to simply continue to increase funding and incentives to help provide additional affordable housing, especially for the rental housing populations and farm worker housing. In particular, the CBDG program is an outstanding program that really helps facilitate a lot of the great work we're able to do here, but that program is limited and we're not allowed to use those funds for new housing construction. We simply need more housing available of all types here in the county, and expansion of that program will go a long way. The home funding, expanding federal low-income housing credits, as well as identifying in particular new permanent financing sources to help leverage and help make these projects become available and come online to low-income developers are critical for advancing our efforts. We've been able to do a lot, and there's been a high demand for the housing voucher programs here in the county, but we need to see particular voucher programs expanded and increased, a particular project-based vouchers that really help spur the development for housing for those lower income housing households. and the housing choice vouchers, which address those disparities in low income and minorities. Also, we have the cost of rent here in Monterey County at every level is a challenge and a barrier. And those voucher programs we're seeing simply aren't able to keep up at this current point with the high cost of rent here in the county, even in those affordable ranges. And that really needs to be addressed. We would like to get that on focus for you. There's also a real emphasis on for homelessness. We have so many people who are at the brink, either in overcrowding or at the risk of homelessness, that anything to increase specifically the tax credit as well as flexible housing subsidy programs are going to go a long way to help prevent homelessness in the county. Next slide. In general, we simply have a shortage of housing at all levels, whether it be market rate or affordable, to be able to meet the demand in the county and the growing demand. There are significant barriers. It is very difficult in California and very difficult in Monterey County to get new development, to move forward. There are in the unincorporated areas, the further away we are from city centers, the more infrastructure that's needed. California Environmental Quality Act is a fantastic tool to protect the environment, but really creates challenges as well as significant litigation threats to any development, any land use issues here in California, including affordable housing projects. And so that is an area where anything that can be done to help expand CEQA exemptions for affordable housing in particular, helping to focus on infill projects that keep those projects where we already have services or the cost of getting infrastructure and services are significantly less, are critical to help incentivize both protections for affordable and market rate housing developments to give them some relief from litigation risk over CEQA and land use issues. The other, what's so important is, part of where smart development is, it makes it, and where we do a lot of collaboration between the county and the cities. Much of the funding is geared towards county jurisdictions applying for the funding and necessarily partnering with our city partners. However, when we see developments go into the city limits and within infill projects within cities, those RENA credits go exclusively to the cities. There's no ability to share those credits, making it incredibly challenging for the county in the unincorporated area to meet our RENA numbers while sticking with a regional strategy that best meets the regional needs. So some focus on allowing sharing of RENA credits would go a long way. And with that, I'll pass it to our next presenter.
Good morning. I'm Eric Chatham. I'm the Director of IT for the County of Monterey. And I'm going to just briefly cover some of the issues we've seen about closing the digital divide. As you're aware, Monterey County is very large and very diverse in its topography. And the COVID-19 pandemic underscored the critical need for broadband and cellular coverage to support distance learning, public safety and outreach, work from home environment, telehealth, and e-commerce that's needed during this time. What we had asked from you is that we look for support in all efforts to expand broadband and cellular to underserved areas. Look for increased funding for local broadband and cellular projects so that they can be moved forward at a faster pace. And any regulation that can be adjusted to improve the cost and coverage to internet and broadband services, especially to the underserved. Next slide. As we've seen, and as you're all attending this meeting virtually, one of the things that we've come to realize has become a part of our daily processes is our digital connectivity and our virtual connectivity. And we would hope that you would continue to support a permanent increase for virtual access for all constituents to join public meetings, for doing distance learning and participation in any of our services, and continued participation and access through all of our meetings virtually, as well as in person when we get to that point, as they're governed by the Brown Act. And also to allow additional county services to be provided via virtual means, especially in the telehealth space and some of our outreach services that we have throughout the county. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. This is Gary Millay from the Office of Emergency Services. Welcome, legislators. As you're, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay,
We can hear
sorry. As you're probably all aware, the county, as most counties, is very dependent upon federal and state disaster assistance. And we would really appreciate your support to ensure that FEMA and CDA support lasts the full duration of the event. And as an example, we still do not have California Disaster Assistance Act for any of the COVID emergency other than Great Plains. And although we received disaster assistance from FEMA for our recent fires, they end the emergency period after the fire is contained. And as we all know, every major fire that we've had in recent times has had significant damage from the following storm the very next winter. As we have just seen over the last few days, we've had significant damage to the county. However, that does not qualify, even though it is directly fire related, to any assistance, and we would have to file for a new disaster application. We hope you could support expediting the timeliness and frequency of FEMA and CDA claims for approval. As an example, we submitted a streamlined claim to FEMA last May, and those projects are still not obligated, and my office has not received any reimbursement from any of the COVID projects that we have submitted through the EOC. We would like you to support and oppose any changes to FEMA policies that make it more difficult for the county to qualify for disaster assistance. And in reality, this is a measure that FEMA is proposing as we speak that makes it more difficult for not only the county, but the state to qualify for disaster assistance. Section 1232 and 1239 of the Disaster Recovery Reform Act is currently being reviewed, and they are proposing significant elevation of the thresholds that we would have to meet to qualify for a disaster assistance. If this proposal was in effect over the last 10 years, more than half of the disasters that we received disaster assistance for would not qualify for that assistance. And we ask you to support funding emergency management planning, pre-disaster mitigation, and disaster evacuation transportation networks to help our county prepare and recover for the disasters that we do encounter. As we all know, the FEMA statistic of for every dollar you spend, $9 are gained when you spend that on preparedness activities. Last year, Kansan Chu recognized that and proposed legislation in the state to have state funding for emergency managers around the state. However, because of COVID, that bill died and has not been taken up by any other legislators at this point. Next slide, please. Climate change and construction into the wildland-urban interface have increased our frequency and severity of wildfires as it has in counties around the state. Additional funding for fuel management is needed, as well as post-event mitigations to reduce the risk of mudslides. The property owners face challenges to retain insurance, make their properties more fire resilient, and adhere to confusing or cumbersome regulations. And so we hope that you can support funding fuel management activities and support streamlining these regulations so it makes it easier for homeowners to do the mitigating activities necessary to protect their own property. We hope you can support funding post-fire recovery and mitigation activities, including debris removal and to prevent potential mudslides. As I mentioned, when you get a major fire, that emergency does not end until the next winter. In every case, there's much more damage many times from the mudslides and the debris flows than there was from the actual fire. We hope we can support protecting our property owners from unfair fire insurance rate increases and cancellations when they're in the wildland-urban interface. And also, anybody that has to qualify for fair plan insurance through the state, that does not include debris removal if they do suffer a loss from fire. As we had recently during our fires, all of those property owners had to either get state debris removal to come in, or they had to pay for it out of their pocket. Their insurance would not cover that. And we also hope you can support funding, providing incentives for private property owners to make their properties more fire resilient by qualifying for mitigation grants. Even the people that were qualified for private assistance through FEMA, they were not allowed, as the county is in many cases, to do mitigating actions to prevent that same thing happening the next time a disaster comes through. That's all I have. Thank you very much. Supervisor Leo, back to you.
Thank you very much, Gary. I appreciate that. We're going to go into comments by our state legislators and federal legislators, but we wanted to really thank our staff for their presentation. We had asked them, among many issues that the county confronts each year, to just focus on some key ones for this coming legislative cycle, and I appreciate those comments. We all know that these are the most challenging times, not only with the pandemic, but last year with 3 fires in Monterey County, and with the storms, we saw that a proportion of Highway 1 just got washed out. And we know that's going to take months to get that repaired by Caltrans. Prior to that, we were dealing with Pfeiffer Bridge going out for numerous months. So these are all issues that have an impact on the economy, on tourism, and make it challenging also for employees and residents that live in those impacted areas. So I'm going to just start us off and go into our legislators. And we're going to start off with our State Senator from Salinas, Ana Caballero, and I know Jimmy Pineda is going to join us at 11, so we'll probably jump to him later, but we're going to keep going down the list here. Senator Caballero, thank you for joining us. And I just want to also tell the legislators, we know this is a partnership in your legislative efforts. Also, we want to be supportive of the work that you do for us in Sacramento and Washington. So this is, we also want to hear what work we could also be of assistance in supporting as you move forward in your legislative priorities this coming year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Supervisor. Just let me say that I really appreciated the report from the staff. I think they did an excellent job, and they were really very specific about things that that would help here in the county as well as the rest of the state. So duly noted. Some of this we're either working on or will work on, and I'm going to speak really quickly. I do apologize ahead of time. I need to get off at close to 11 o'clock. We've had an emergency come up in another county, so I need to at least be part of that as well. But let me just start off by saying thank you very much for this opportunity to say a few words. I traditionally have done work in housing, water availability and quality, health access equity, reducing poverty, climate change equity, and more recently, broadband access. So I'm going to be doing work in all of these areas this year. The broadband access is SB 28, and really it's access for rural and disadvantaged communities. It's taking away the authority of the big telecom companies to decide where they're going to expand and to give local government the opportunity to create partnerships and utilize state property as part of that. But what I really want to do is talk about the issue that's in the forefront of everybody's brain, which is the pandemic. Yesterday, the legislature extended the eviction moratorium in the budget. I had a bill, SB 3, that I've been working on along with the Assembly, and that legislation, the eviction moratorium extension creates an opportunity for landlords to get some money in their pocket and for the tenants to be free from eviction until the end of June. Really important. We got it done on an emergency basis, and I think it's going to be. There's some real good protections for tenants. We understood completely that we needed to get some money in the hands of landlords so that tenants wouldn't be burdened by the rent that they owed, and it was described to me as a debt that would probably be owed for a generation. And so we want to make sure that we're doing everything possible to get that money out. More on that later. Also working on a budget priority for the governor and the legislature, which is grants for small and micro businesses. The governor rolled out a $500 million small business grant program, which is it is currently being administered, and he wants to put another $560 million into that grant program. Very clear. We had a budget hearing in the budget sub 4 that I chair. That it's very clear that the administration has underestimated what's going to be required in order for us to meet the needs of small and micro businesses. So we'll be working on that over the next couple of weeks to make sure that if we take early action on it, that it works and that we're going to actually have enough money. I'm quite frankly really concerned that the administration will see the exact same effect that we had when we did the money for undocumented workers. That was way too little. 10% of the undocumented workers were able to access that money. So it sets up expectations and then disappoints. And we don't want to do that with the small and micro businesses. I'm working on a bill very diligently, SB 74 on that as well. We are also working in budget sub 4 on CARES Act equity for the counties and cities that got shortchanged by the Department of Finance. There are some counties that got twice as much as other counties, the larger counties. We think and feel very strongly that we should make that up with state funds. More on that later. And then the issue that I've been working on the hardest, which is making sure that we're creating opportunities for farm workers to have PPE at the beginning, to be able to get tested, and more recently, the vaccine distribution. The farm workers have been in the 1B category, and I've been trying to move them up on the priority list. We're at the point now where they're finally eligible in most of the counties that are part of the 12th Senate District. And I've been working with trying to get the governor to add replacement wages as part of his executive order. I want to commend the County of Monterey for taking action and grabbing that opportunity to do it locally. I think that's been the #1 issue that has prohibited us from keeping farm workers safe, is that they got to earn a living. And if you don't feel too good, you're going to show up for work anyway. And that's how you spread this virus. I also want to commend the ag community for stepping up and being early supporters of replacement wages as well as housing for farm workers. I've also been working with the Retailers Association. I've been looking for alternatives to getting more vaccine into our county, and they have the capacity to do mobile clinics. Right now, they're licensed by the federal government, and they get their vaccine separate from what the county receives. And they're very anxious to do a pilot project. I asked the governor to make that a pilot executive order. And basically what I was told is that these are the kinds of things that happen at the county level as opposed to at the state level. So we're still working on it. There is an issue with the state finally approving them to go out and do anything beyond the congregate care facilities. They're doing the vaccination among the congregate care facilities, but they don't have authority right now to go beyond that. And so I'm trying to break through that bureaucratic morass that seems to stop anything that's creative from happening. And so I'm hoping that once we get approval, that we're going to be able to partner with them, and they'll be able to come in and be partners in making sure that farm workers get vaccinated. They're very interested in farm workers in particular because they feel like they're trusted. People go to pharmacies all the time to get their medications, and they're trusted in the community. So thank you for the opportunity to say a few words. I'll stay on as long as I can, and maybe be able to catch you up again if the other Zoom call ends. But I appreciate this opportunity to talk about things that are, I think, near and dear to all of our hearts, and appreciate all the hard work that you're doing as well.
Thank you, Senator.
If I could, I just want to say that we have some of the other legislators that'll follow me, the newly minted Senator Laird, as well as former supervisor and now Assembly member Robert Rivas, and and Mark Stone, we've been working in tandem and trying to make sure that we can do everything possible to get as much vaccine as possible, given the situation with the federal government and their dispersal. Let me just say one other thing is I've been told by the vaccine companies that the rollout of how many doses we're going to get in California depends on how quickly we get them into people's arms. And right now, the last time I took a look at it, we're at 35%. It's really absolutely unacceptable. We got to move these vaccines a lot faster in order for us to get more when the federal government distribution gets up and running in a much smoother fashion. So my pitch to all the counties is let's make sure we're getting those vaccines out as quickly as possible. And we know that rural California is not getting our fair share, so we've been beating that drum and we'll continue to do that.
Thank you, Senator Caballero, and thank you for your efforts, and we look forward to supporting you on that work that you mentioned today.
Thank you.
Let's go to Senator John Laird. He's no stranger to us, former Secretary of Natural Resources, former Assembly member. Glad to have you back in the legislature, Senator, and I just want to give a quick shout out to your staff, Angela Chestnut, a longtime friend, and now part of your office, so I was excited to hear about that she joined your team. So take it away, Senator Laird.
Well, that's great. Between you and Anna, you've covered a lot of the things that I wanted to cover. So perfect. And I associate myself completely with Anna's comments, particularly since she's taken the lead on the tenant protection part for the Senate and is working hand in hand on the vaccine. So it's good. I know there's not a lot of time, and I heard clearly your presentation about what your priorities are, but let me just, in a quick bullet-like way, update you on a few things about me and issues. First, it's just, I am the one so-called junior legislator on this call, and everybody else was there. I have had to put together a staff that I could never be with and staff 4 offices I could never go into. It is a really strange way to start this whole thing. And while Luis called out Angela Chestnut, who I'm really happy to have as district director, I'm also very happy to have Kate Daniels in the Monterey office. And the great thing about both of them is they each worked previously for county supervisors. So they will understand the county issues really well. And when 2 new people start the week after next, I'm finally full up in Sacramento. So we have the opportunity to really run. I presented a problem to the Senate president with regard to committee assignments because I could have moved into any of a number of roles, but she patiently had senators waiting 2, 4, and 6 years for various appointments. So she compensated by appointing me to everything. I am on 1/3 of the standing committees in the state Senate. So I'm on rules, which runs the House and does confirmation. I am the lead on joint audit and vice chair, assembly as the chair, as Luis would know. We just got Monday and Thursday, the 2 audits on EDD, and we'll be having an oversight hearing and focusing on that. I am chair of the Assembly Budget Subcommittee on Education, which is half the budget, and already today was on 2 Zooms with regard to the governor's reopening plan. I'm in the thick of that. It needs to be fixed, and there's bunches of issues there. Then I am on natural resources, labor and pensions, and judiciary, and I'm on appropriations. So almost anything that comes by you or is of interest to you, I will be able to work with you on. Issues, Anna mentioned vaccines, and I heard from Elsa. I did a Zoom a couple of days ago with advocates and health officials from Santa Cruz and Monterey counties, and I totally agree with them that the vaccine should be targeted to where the cases are. And that actually disproportionately puts it where there are disadvantaged communities and people in need. And that is very important. Anna mentioned tenants. We adopted that. The governor had just signed it minutes ago, mentioned the EDD audit. And then there are the local issues. Obviously, with the road out in Big Sur and other issues out of the storms, the mudslides over in the Salinas Spreckles area, there are going to be things that we want to work locally and make sure that everything's advocated for at the state in the maximum possible level, as if Big Sur hasn't been through enough. Now here's this. And I also heard what was mentioned on fire, and that is one of the big issues, because in both Santa Cruz and Monterey, in fire recovery, we have the recovery that we have to deal with, but fire insurance is being threatened in all locations. There was an issue about whether resources were adequate at the state at the time of the fires last summer. There's the issue about prescribed fire and making sure we do that and increase that, about fuels preparation. All those things are things we're going to have to work on. And then when you look at my legislative priorities, I am still putting together the package, but one bill I'm really vetting and working on is that while the governor, we in the Brown administration stepped up the first forest carbon plan, the first prescribed fire units in modern times, adding 6 of them to CAL FIRE, doing 250,000 acres of fuels treatment and fire prevention a year. And Gavin Newsom increased it exponentially as he has been there. And yet right now we're just doing it year to year. We're just sort of taking it as it comes. And so what I'm looking at doing is introducing a bill that does a 10-year framework for what the state should do. How many acres should we deal with prescribed fire? How many acres should we deal with management, fuels management? Where do we have the resources to move in the event of firestorms such as we had last August, so that we actually have a framework for budget planning and other planning about what we should do for fire. And so I am meeting with stakeholders. I'm trying to figure out what the best way is to tie that down. The Senate has a plan that's coming to the caucus in a couple of weeks that really deals with this, and I hope the bill will line up totally with it. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the other issues, I'm working really closely to try to get the governor to revise his school reopening, and it goes hand in hand with a lot of the things that were said in public health here before. And there are a lot of moving pieces, and we know that distance learning is inferior, that people that have special needs or are in disadvantaged communities or are homeless as students fall through the cracks in this. At the same time, we want to reopen safely. We want to make sure there's not a divide between advantaged school districts and disadvantaged school districts. And we're working really hard to revamp the program to make sure that happens. And then lastly, just doing my best to work with everybody at the local level. I already did a Zoom this morning with the Farm Bureau in Monterey about cooperative extension, and we're trying to figure out how through the budget process to make sure UC doesn't cut them. I'm doing a Zoom later today with the hospitality industry of the Monterey Peninsula on the impacts. I've been working with different businesses in trying to make sure there's equity in whatever the reopening is and that there's support from the state. And so I just stand ready to work as a partner on your issues, whether it's through my staff to me or on the committees or what the initiatives are you outlined. And you have a great team here. I mean, I talk to Robert Rivas and Mark Stone regularly. I see Anna at a socially distanced distance on the Senate floor. We had to take a break yesterday because we had to wait for this period of time that the Assembly could consider the eviction bills. And I walked over and was able to catch up with Anna during that time. And I think you have a team that really wants to work with you together. So thanks for having me here today. And I really look forward to any questions that you have as we get, I think I can stay. And so I'll try to cover for Anna if you have any questions about the state Senate after she has to go.
Thank you. Thank you, John, for willing to step in too. And when Anna leaves, we'll probably get Jimmy Panetta to jump in her place. Let's go to our next two speakers, which they're no stranger to county government as former supervisors. Let's go to Mark Stone first and then Robert Rivas, who's joined us.
Thanks, Luis. Very happy to be here and be a part of these conversations. You do, interestingly, looking at the four legislators here who have lots of local experience, you do have access to people who understand the issues that you're facing. And I think there's some common themes here for Monterey County and for really the rest of the Central Coast. What we're hearing from you and other counties up and down the coast are really very similar issues. So not to rehash, but I think add a little perspective. The deal that was just done this week and signed today for tenant relief moved the cliff for a lot of evictions from Monday till the end of June. And I think that provides us with a lot of challenges moving ahead, because we can't take it for granted that the issue has been solved, even though it is trying to help tenants and especially small landlords be able to manage the fiscal situation that they're in. We end up with another cliff really at the end of June, because I don't see the economy or the pandemic situation changing that much between now and then. So June was a bit of a compromise, unfortunately. But if we think we've solved that and finished the work, then we're going to be up against another crunch by the end of June. But I guess at least it gives a little bit of respite to ensure that tenants are not being evicted, and then gives us some time to see how this program works and whether the investments that the state is going to be making and drawing down some of the federal funds, to see how that works and where some of the challenges lie. So we still have quite a bit of work to do to protect people, keep them housed, and not exacerbate the homeless issue really any further. As far as the COVID and pandemic response goes, we've seen, and what was reported here, and we know to be true, is that a lot of the larger urban areas have seen significant benefit from the relief packages that the rural areas like ours have not seen. So that is going to continue to be a challenge. And we're seeing a lot of that as well in the vaccine distribution. You're correct that some of the rural counties, Monterey included, really have not seen the numbers of vaccines that others have seen. And because a lot of your distribution, whether it's to farm workers or underserved communities, to a lot of the seniors who are shut in, it's the safety net that's going to provide access to vaccines for them. So as the state is stressing about the number of vaccines that are going into arms, as they say, and getting those rates up, the effect of that will be to continue to exacerbate the inequity in the distribution, because reaching seniors, reaching farm workers, exercising the safety net, kind of by definition, those populations are harder to get to, less trustful often of the entities in the distribution. And so the FQHCs, who are well prepared to be able to deliver vaccines and help, and do that fairly efficiently and effectively, are not going to be seen always as the best distribution, I'm afraid, because of the numbers and the stated need to get vaccines into arms as quickly as possible. So that is something I think to watch out for. And as the state is now moving to putting an organization like Blue Shield in charge of the vaccines, and the notion that if any organization's not meeting the percentages that are set for them, that they will actually take vaccines back, it is, to me, very alarming. That also will exacerbate the inequity in the distribution of vaccines. So I think I understand the need to get vaccines out as quickly as possible and into as many arms as possible, but we have to do that in an equitable way. The legislature has valued equity and is constantly asking the administration about equity. And the administration says a lot of the right things, that the plans are to be as equitable as possible. But if you look at the actual distribution mechanisms, they're not heading in a way that's going to answer that equity issue really very effectively. And I think that ultimately is going to be a challenge. So I think we need to work together to make sure that we're not going to be shortchanged, as we have been with a lot of the COVID relief. We are currently looking at the governor's budget plans for early action and quick action. There are several different layers, but unfortunately we have yet to see a lot of detail. There's certain categories of money that have been proposed, but not a lot of detail around them. And the legislature wants to see some of that detail so that we understand where those investments are being made. But most importantly, we it is our job to be that piece of accountability that you're expecting, that our shared constituents are expecting for how the money gets spent. So we've seen failures of that with the EDD lately, and some of the audits that have shown that a lot of the money, while distributed quickly, was not distributed appropriately. And the question of fraud really is hanging heavily over EDD and anything that they're now doing as they move forward. So our jobs as legislators have changed a lot over the last year. We've been focusing quite a bit more on constituent services. And just to give you an example in my office, and I know these numbers are very similar in all of the offices, we've seen probably a 700 to 800% increase in the number of constituent cases that we handle on an annual basis. And EDD, for example, was about 5% prior of the issues that we would get in normal course of a year. Now they're 80 to 90% of the cases that we're getting because people are struggling. People need the help. And when the systems don't function the way that they should be, and getting resources, getting money out to the people who need it in order to hold their lives together, that provides a real challenge, I think, for all of us. So our offices are doing far more constituent work than we had been before. And I think appropriately, that's where our staffs are really spending their time and their effort. It's not a good thing when we're having to be that conduit for agencies that should be just responding to constituents, but we know that that's kind of how the system works. And that's why you've heard from all of us that we're rattling sabers a little bit, trying to make sure that the state functions that have been set up are actually working to the benefit of our constituents on a regular basis. As far as my bill package goes, there's a bit to be determined to it, but I think the one thing that we'll be working on that affects Monterey County is as we continue to look at the juvenile justice arena. I'm working with CPOC and a lot of the probation chiefs across the state and a lot of the stakeholders to provide some better understanding and some bounds around how long our kids are being detained and held in the juvenile system. Because when they get kind of lost in that system, it is to their detriment and not to their ability to move forward. So we need to get them out from under the stigma of being justice involved and yet provide them broader services to the juveniles and to their families in a more cohesive way and in a way that is not driven more from the punitive standpoint, but more from a rehabilitation standpoint. And I know Monterey has good programs in place and has been a leader in a lot of that. So that's an area that we're working on. Broadband is significant. The one change I think this year over prior years is we have now seen, and legislators have now seen, how reliant our communities are, our education system and our businesses are on the broadband that we do have, and the gaps in service and the old definitions of what coverage means and how well the incumbent providers have done, which in my view, they haven't done very well, are starting to be shown for what they are. And a lot of rural areas are really lacking. The biggest problem we've had is the influence the incumbent providers have had on legislators in the past, and the bills that have been proposed have not been successful because of that. So the one good thing coming out of the pandemic and the reliance now on broadband is that I think we have more legislators truly understanding the impact on their communities and the need to expand broadband beyond what the incumbent providers have defined as success, because we know it has not been success. So I'm hoping that will give us more fruitful conversations to be able to truly provide broadband into areas that we haven't seen before. Because we know we have last mile providers and internet service providers who can help us with the last bit, but what we really lack is some of the true pipelines of getting that broadband out to the local community so that the last mile providers can finish that job. So that's one of the things that I'm hoping will be more seriously considered as we move through this year, just because we've got more legislators who will now be, I'm hoping, more understanding of what we've been trying to do for years on expanding broadband. So I appreciate being here, being able to talk to you about issues that you're facing and talk about what the state is really trying to accomplish. But we can't accomplish it without our county partners. You're an arm of the state. Which is why you suffer when the state suffers. I know that. And you are really where the rubber meets the road for state and federal programs. So we can't do this without you, which is why we have to do a better job supporting the safety net, supporting the programs that you have, and supporting your public health mandate. So thank you.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you for really bringing up those real challenges to get issues like the digital divide through places like Sacramento. It's totally on point. It's why we haven't progressed as far, but hopefully this year, with all attention on it, we will advance that and make some significant changes there. Let's go to Assemblymember Robert Rivas. Annette Diadamo informed me he's on the line. Okay, thank you, Robert, for joining us.
Hey, yeah. Supervisor Alejo, how are you?
Good, good.
Good to see you guys.
Yes,
awesome.
Sir.
Hey, well, it's great to be with you guys, and I really appreciate, like my colleagues in the legislature, the opportunity to really listen and to hear the priorities of the county. And I think that that's always the most important thing for me. And this is always such an important opportunity to hear the priorities of the county. But what I really appreciate about the county of Monterey, which obviously is the largest part of the district I represent in the 30th Assembly District, is that the advocacy from the county, our relationship certainly goes much farther than this one meeting. And I know over the past year I had constant communication, with Luis, with Supervisor Alejo, with Supervisor Lopez, because this is the only way we can truly address a lot of the challenges that we have seen is through this dialogue and through a cooperative approach. Obviously really appreciate working with Senator Caballero and Laird and with Mark Stone. Look, I really appreciate what Mark said. Obviously our focus has been on COVID-19, on this pandemic, on managing and trying our best to do everything we can to address a lot of the challenges and the disparities. But the piece Mark mentioned, what I really appreciated, is this component of equity. We've been hearing it a lot lately because of the challenges, the logistical challenges, the supply issues we have encountered with the distribution of the COVID-19 vaccine. But I think since the onset of this pandemic, we have been working very, very hard. I know I directly worked with Supervisors Alejo and Lopez on this equity component as it relates to all parts of this pandemic, whether it's testing and contact tracing, whether it's the allocation of resources, as we know, was mentioned by staff when I hopped onto this call around housing and homelessness. Is we have to keep in mind that there was a recent statistic that stated that the counties of Monterey and San Benito, in these two counties together, they lead the state of California in the way of where 1 in 10 households in our two counties has an essential worker and lives in an overcrowded household. And that's a problem. And so certainly, addressing the impacts, we're seeing these equity issues, these huge disparities of those that have been impacted by COVID-19. It requires, a diligent effort to ensure that our jurisdiction not only has the resources, or that not only has the support, but these very important resources to do something to manage a lot of the disparities and challenges that exist and that we have seen, and that's why it was really encouraging to see the state of California and to see our governor model this housing for harvest program, modeled after the work that was done proactively in the county of Monterey. But it was discouraging that we have not been, our district, our region has not been a recipient of resources from that program. And so those are the challenges and battles, and to the point Mark made around equity, when it comes to this uneven response from the federal government and state government, when it comes to ensuring that we're providing resources to our most vulnerable residents in our most vulnerable regions and highest risk regions, our rural and unincorporated areas. And so that is something that we continue to tackle. It's certainly something that has consumed my time, the time of my staff, in my new role as Chair of Assembly Agriculture, in my role as Vice Chair of the California Latino Legislative Caucus. Our focus has been on this pandemic. And as I mentioned, most recently on this vaccination distribution system, and how we're learning more of the details and the goals of this administration and of our governor's plan to completely overhaul the vaccination system. But some other areas that our office has been focused on most recently, working with Supervisor Lopez, who brought this issue to our attention around INSV issue, this virus that has certainly led to tens of millions of dollars in losses to agriculture, local agriculture. It's a virus that's unique to our region, and it's getting worse and spreading. And so on that front, we have been working, our office with Senator Caballero's office, working with Supervisor Lopez and with local stakeholders, working with Caltrans, and as John Laird mentioned, on this front as well, working with the UC Cooperative Extension to secure the necessary resources to get some staff positions that have been frozen in our region to staff positions that are critical to studying and addressing this specific issue. And as far as our legislative package, very similar to my colleagues, it's still a work in progress, but some of the bills that we do intend to focus on and some early legislation that we have introduced, obviously very important to the County of Monterey and very important to our region. One bill is, the focus of supporting our most vulnerable residents, and for us, it's our farm workers. As we know, the impacts that they've experienced this past year in the pandemic, both the health impacts and the economic impacts, but we also saw the impacts to our farm workers in this unprecedented wildfire season that we recently had. And so we introduced the bill, which is Assembly Bill 73, which is the wildfire or the Farm Worker Wildfire Smoke Protection Act. And so what the bill does is it would require the state to stockpile N95 masks. And at the same time, it would require that the state deliberately have a plan in place should we have unhealthy air quality in our region or in any agricultural region, to ensure that plan would be triggered for the distribution of these masks. And with that, there's also an education a component to ensure that we're educating our farm workers, our agricultural employers about health precautions and safety when it comes to unhealthy air quality. The other area, working with my colleague from Southern California, from the Imperial Valley, Assemblymember Eduardo Garcia, around vaccinations and around what we know now is a lot of the challenges around the distribution of vaccinations. And so, obviously when it comes to vaccine, the distribution of this vaccination and the logistics of how we distribute this vaccine, it is critical, and it's critical to our underrepresented regions, to our rural and agricultural regions. And when we talk about the logistics about how we are, going to provide access for our essential workforce, and for us, it's for our farm workers who have been hit the hardest by this pandemic. It's how are we going to successfully ensure that we are going to inoculate as many farm workers as we can, and it's going to require a very strategic approach. And so that's why we've worked very, very hard. I've been working through the Latino Caucus as our caucus has brought a lot of awareness to address the disparities that exist through data, through recent studies, and a new study will be released next week, where we just seek to further highlight these disparities to make our case and why we certainly need more support, more resources. And when it comes to this vaccine distribution, trying to break through to this administration, which we've had these conversations with our governor. We had a productive call yesterday with the California Department of Health and Dr. Galley, but is around this issue that we fought very hard to ensure that farm workers are given priority status for this vaccination, but making the vaccine available to them. If we're going to successfully inoculate farm workers, it's going to require a lot more than just being given priority status and the availability of this vaccine. Access is a big issue. And so, ensuring that we are strategically working at the local level with nonprofit organizations, that, we are doing everything we can to ensure that we're providing outreach, education, and engagement is critical. And that's why I'm very encouraged by the local work that's been done. Monterey County has done an exceptional job throughout this pandemic by building this very a collaborative coalition of through local government, our local stakeholders, to proactively advance these plans to ensure that the health and safety of this essential workforce is protected. And this is no different. Supply remains an issue for this vaccine. The logistical challenges we've experienced here in our state and really across the country, they're inexcusable. It's encouraging that the administration is overhauling the system, but we need to be in a position to hit the ground running when supply becomes available. And I'm very encouraged of the work that's been done already. I'm optimistic that that this is a region, because of the work that's been done locally, Supervisor Lopez and Alejo and local agricultural stakeholders, we're going to be in a position where our farm workers are going to be in good hands. But certainly working with you to ensure that we are advocating, trying to understand this vaccine, this distribution overhaul, working with this new third party, which will be Blue Shield, giving them the confidence that we do have a plan in place to successfully, address the disparities that we know exist. And the only way we are going to overcome this virus and get this state back on track is by proactively going after and addressing those that have been hit hardest and are most vulnerable and susceptible to this virus. And so, the work that's been done locally, I can't speak enough about that. And then just really quickly, some of the other bills that we will be focusing on, obviously, are around agriculture, around natural working lands. We look to, ensure that we continue our work to bring attention to the opportunity around natural working lands as it relates to land that's going to be taken out of some production because of SGMA. Our opportunities to sequester land and how we manage our, natural working lands and make sure that it's a larger part of our climate, our climate change portfolio here in California. One important issue is we've introduced, we have not rolled anything out around it. It's Assembly Bill 125, and it's a bond measure which focuses on creating a more resilient food system here in California. This is a time when food insecurity is increasing across our state, and it's hitting our most vulnerable. It's ironic where you have farm workers that earn the lowest wages, do incredibly hard work to send the freshest produce to the market. And they suffer from higher rates of food insecurity than anyone else. And so certainly this is an attempt to our goal is to create a bond that's going to help California's food and farming system ensure that we are dealing with these unexpected shocks and impacts from climate change and from this pandemic. And so please I look forward to speaking more on this issue once we have more in place. But with that, certainly really appreciate all of the support and the work from my colleagues. This is a region that is well represented, but certainly there's no shortage of challenges. As we know, these historic wildfires that have occurred just yesterday. I'm getting these reports about the impacts that these rains have caused, especially in the Big Sur area. And so certainly, please know that our region and our members of the Senate, myself, and Mark Stone, we are in constant contact, trying to advance, these incredibly important issues for our region, and trying to work through these channels of government with this administration and with all the appropriate agencies to ensure that we are doing everything we can to address a lot of these challenges. But certainly appreciate the time and look forward to the rest of the conversation.
Thank you, Assemblymember Rivas. And Monterey County was the first to support your bill, AB 73, to protect farmers. Because we know that having that PPE available needs to be standardized for future fires, which we know are unfortunately going to be more commonplace in the years ahead. So we were proud to support that effort. We're going to go now to Congressmember Jimmy Panetta. Thank you for joining us. And we'd love to hear a federal report from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Alejo. I appreciate that. And obviously, Chair Root Askew, good to see you in that position, as well as the rest of the members. And of course, my California colleagues at the state level. Thank you very much for all that they have done, everything that you have done at the local level. I think that was a very good summary by all of the legislators, obviously coming off, tuning in, and getting on to Roberts there. I really appreciate everything that he has done in his first term to really represent us in Sacramento. I feel lucky not only to have those members and all of you on the board as colleagues, but as someone who lives here, who grew up here, all of you to represent me and my family up there in Sacramento and here at in Monterey County. So thank you very much. Look, I think there's a lot to talk about. All right, I think we understand that, especially just looking not just at the past year, but looking at the past couple weeks, when we at the federal level have gone from an insurrection to an impeachment to an inauguration. But fortunately, I do believe we're on to an improvement. The fourth I word I will use, an improvement of the federal strategy going forward, and obviously legislation going forward, and obviously making my job easier. I will be the first to admit that when it comes to working not just with a Democratic executive branch, but a Democratic Senate as well in the Democratic-controlled House of Representatives. So that will be a little easier going forward. Obviously, a number of issues that I could highlight, but I do want to hit on the one that I'm hearing the most about here on the Central Coast, and that's obviously vaccines. And I believe that what we're seeing right now is the problems that we're having with the vaccine distribution. It really is an example of the continued struggle we're having with COVID-19. I firmly believe that we at all levels, not just in this state and in this country, but around the world, are continuing to figure this disease out. And we're continuing to figure out the best strategy to contain the disease. And it just seems that even with all the tools that we are using, we're constantly trying to keep up. You look at the shutdowns that were applied early on that hurt our economy. You look at the testing that we tried to get ahead of, but there just wasn't enough reliable and timely tests. And now you have the vaccines and the issues with them and getting them out, but you also have these variants. Now, I don't know if any of you saw, I try to listen to and track Michael Osterholm, who is a leading epidemiologist at the University of Minnesota. And I can tell you, everything that this guy has said throughout this pandemic has been spot on. And I'm disappointed that I have to report to you that this morning he was on CNN and his words were, "The worst has yet to come." His words were, "The darkest hours are still ahead of us and with this pandemic." And that's for a number of reasons. And as I like to say, we have not been taming this tiger. We have been riding this tiger, unfortunately. And I do believe a large part of that, though, has to do with the disjointed, the divisive, and disorganized strategy of the former administration. It was a strategy in addressing this pandemic that literally left us with a national strategy, as many of you have heard me say, federally funded, state mandated, and locally executed. And as you've heard from my colleagues just recently at the state level, it's pretty much how it's been. But I have to say, in Congress and last year, despite everything that's going on, we were able to provide a record amount of relief when it came to actually funding for resources for you at the state and local level to fight this disease. And I do believe it's because of that funding that we were able to keep the economy afloat, keep the poverty rate flat, And it also led to a record in personal savings in 2020. And also Monterey County, as a result of the CARES Act, received $45 million. Now, at the federal level, we also invested $60 billion with a B in regards to the development of vaccines. Now, yes, that was done, and the development of the vaccine was done in record timing, and I do believe that's something to brag about. But the amount and lack of is not to brag about. The distribution strategy by the former administration is definitely not something to brag about. And basically, it was sort of, as I see it, a hands-off strategy that left it up to the states, who then delegated it to the counties, unfortunately. And that has left us with the current situation that we face right now. And I think all of us are hearing the complaints at all levels, unfortunately, about the distribution strategy that's taken place. Now, obviously, because of the calls to my office, we held a number of roundtables with hospital heads, with county health department heads here on the Central Coast. And I'm sure I heard what all of you have been hearing, that it's because of the lack of supply, the lack of logistics, and of course, a lack of communication is what we're seeing. Now, obviously, there are a number of contributing factors to that at all levels, but I have to say, I do believe it was the lack of a unified strategy from the former administration that contributed to this, was a big factor in contributing to this unfortunate strategy that we're dealing with when it comes to the distribution. But I can proudly say, and I think all of us can proudly say, that as of January 20th, 2021, I do believe that has changed. I do believe that we are going to get the help that we need from this administration when it comes to having a national and unified strategy. Now, I believe President Biden understands that, you can't do it alone at the local level. The state can't do it alone at the state level. And therefore, I agree with him when it comes to having that attitude of having a wartime effort. He used those exact words basically the day after he was sworn in at the inauguration. And that's what it needs to be, a wartime effort. Because right now we are in a race between injections and infections. And I believe it's everybody's obligation at all levels of government to ensure that the injections win at this point. Now, at the federal level, we will continue to play our part, and we will continue to partner with the President Biden to ensure that the injections win. And I think he proved that the day after the inauguration, when he signed a number of executive orders that basically laid out a foundation of how we are to move forward. Executive orders dealing with the supply chain, dealing with the help from the National Guard and the Federal Emergency Management Administration. Executive orders on travel restrictions and masking limitations. Testing, workforce, data collection, treatments, equitable response, and equitable distribution of the vaccines, and then of course, schools and worker safety. And I believe that these are the goals that we want to hear about. I believe that it's these types of executive orders that were the first step in restoring trust of the national strategy, as well as bringing certainty to all of you from the federal government when it comes to vaccines. And then there was the introduction of the rescue package, $1.9 trillion in a rescue package that, as I sum it up, put shots in people's arms, put checks in people's pockets, and put our kids back in our public schools. And they do that with a large number of funding, as I told you, from certain areas, $160 billion for a national vaccination program that focuses on supply, distribution, logistics, administrators. $170 billion for schools to safely reopen, including shoring up our higher education institutions. This is one that the Board of Supervisors would like to hear. $350 billion to state and local governments. $1,400 checks to individuals. Another $400 a week in unemployment insurance. More SBA grants for small businesses, transportation grants, more to our healthcare and supporting the Affordable Care Act, more mental health services, another round of paid leave, more childcare, more rental assistance and rental moratoriums and moratoriums on evictions. And so, two things that I believe are very important, not just now, but I believe going forward in addressing the inequality issues that we have in our country. That's a child tax credit and an advancement of the earned income tax credit, making sure there are tax credits for families who are working so that they can advance to the middle class. And then, of course, it's making sure that people, no matter what documentation status they have, are allowed to receive these types of benefits. Now, you're going to be hearing a lot about that rescue package very soon. And you're going to be hearing a word that I had to learn what the heck it means. And I'm sure you're hearing about it and scratching your head as some of you are. And that's called the reconciliation process. Now, I'm not going to get into that with you because I'm sure if I start talking about it, your eyes would glaze over. Maybe John Laird would be the only one who'd be really interested in that, just because I know he likes that stuff. But I believe right now it's more about progress than it is about process. And so being on the Ways and Means Committee, we're going to be doing a markup on that bill sooner rather than later. I can't tell you exactly when, but I can tell you there's a reason why we switched around our schedule and I'm home this week and not in Washington, D.C. And I will be in D.C. next week. And then you're going to see a House vote on it so we can get it to the Senate and then obviously over to the president's desk for a signature. Now, I just think that this is the type of national bill that is needed to help you out at the local level. And I also believe, like I said, that this is the type of attitude that's needed at the national level, the type of leadership that's needed at the national level, so that this county, Monterey County, and our state of California and our country basically gets the help that it deserves. I think it's the help that it's been calling for, been yearning for, what we need and what we deserve. And trust me, there's going to be more to come besides the rescue package. The next thing you're going to hear about is a recovery package that's going to entail numerous things in dealing with infrastructure and how we look at affordable housing, how we look at broadband, and also basically in how we confront the climate crisis in dealing with energy and climate research, new clean energy jobs, and of course, decarbonizing our energy sector. And then there are the other bills that have been a priority for me, obviously dealing with immigration going forward. An outline has already been put forward by this administration on a comprehensive immigration reform bill, knowing that we have already, based on the work that we have done in the past 4 years, put forward certain bills when it comes to protecting our dreamers, our TPS recipients, providing them with a pathway to citizenship, but also our farm workers with the Farm Workforce Modernization Act, making sure that those who have come here, have worked in agriculture, continue to contribute here and are allowed to do so legally, and obviously revamping the visa process as well. And those are basically going to be pre-baked within the comprehensive immigration reform. However, I'll be the first to tell you that if there are any issues with the comprehensive bill, I will be the first to move out those individual bills through the House and hopefully get them through the Senate and onto the president's desk, because I do believe immigration reform is something that has been a long time coming, especially for us here on the Central Coast. And then, of course, it's dealing with our federal forests, as Assemblyman Rivas mentioned, talking about our federal forests and how we can put more funds towards preventing fires rather than just suppressing fires, and making sure that there's ways to basically have certain ways to not just prevent the fires, but deal with the personnel issues that are there in our federal forests, upping the personnel that can be on the ground to enforce the laws to prevent humans who are the majority of causes for wildfires, and then upping the funding for reforestation projects as well. Look, I could go on and on and on in regards to the many issues, but I do feel that obviously fixing COVID, fixing our economy, and then basically with a rescue package and a recovery package are going to be the priorities right out of the chute for this administration and for us in Congress, amongst everything else we have to deal with, from impeachment and to other crazy members of Congress and things of that nature. But obviously we can walk and chew gum at the same time. That's why we're in this position, and I think that's what we need to do. So look forward to doing it. But I do believe that right now with this new administration, we have our priorities straight. Our leadership in the executive branch has been straightened out. And I do believe that's going to be lead to us getting straight when it comes to fixing COVID and fixing the economy. And look forward to continuing to do the work for all of you, not just at the federal level, but at the state, and working with you at the state and county level as well. Back to you, Supervisor Alejo.
Thank you, Congressmember, and I really appreciate it. Especially, I think all of us realize this new chapter in Washington and chapter of leadership really presents a lot of new opportunities for us, and hopefully get the resources where it really needs to go during this pandemic. So I appreciate your passion and your leadership on those issues you mentioned. We're going to go to, I believe Daniel Chen is here from our new U.S. Senator, first Latino U.S. Senator for California, 170 years. We already made that announcement several weeks ago about your boss. I know we weren't able to have Zach Vadden of Senator Feinstein's office here today, unfortunately, but we're glad to have you, Daniel Chen. So we'd love to hear some comments on behalf of the senators. So thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks so much, Supervisor. I'm so glad to be here with you all. As you all know, we're newly in office, and we're building up our staff here in the state. But it was a real priority for for our chief of staff and our state director to have me jump on this call, to really hear the priorities. And as you guys went through, a number of the issues that are facing the county, these are issues that throughout the senator's career, as a state legislature and also in the Secretary of State's office, that as I spoke to since being designated, that are very near and dear, and certainly priorities for our office. COVID-19, both testing, vaccination, and everything that goes along with it. The equity issues that you all mentioned are first and foremost for us. Housing and homelessness are something that are going to be, very important for us as well. I apologize for the background noise with our telework situation. And closing the digital divide is something that, the senator has worked out a lot in the state legislature, and something that we certainly plan on, pursuing here in the Senate as well. And disaster preparedness, a little bit about my history. I came from Senator Harris's office. I was her deputy state director, or excuse me, now Vice President Harris. So I've got a lot of experience with the issues, especially regarding wildfires. Now we're dealing with the burn scars in these areas as we've dealt with in our last round of storms. So these are all things that we've got experience with on the team, and we really look forward to working, hand in hand with you all at the county level, as Representative Panetta, alluded to and spoke about. We're very optimistic and encouraged about the state and local funding in the newest package. We know that that's absolutely critical, to our areas here in the state. And so, we just look forward, to both building on our staff, putting them in touch with you all, and having that close relationship that I know a lot of us had with you, with Senator Harris's office, and looking to push that forward because, you mentioned ag workers and a number of other issues, and those are all items that, we look forward to working with you all on. So I wish I had a little bit more for you in terms of our priorities, but a lot of that will be, fleshed out in the weeks to come, and we'll be sure to keep you all abreast of that and continue to be a part of these meetings. So we just really appreciate the time and, all the work that you all do as well.
Thank you, Daniel. And we'd like to just extend an invitation to the senator when the time is right, to come and visit Monterey County, the beautiful peninsula, the beautiful Salinas Valley. We'd love to have him just do a visit sometime, when the time is right. So
cool. We appreciate that, and I'll certainly pass along that message, and we hope to take you up on that sooner than later.
All right. Thank you so much. Now we're going to go to the Board of Supervisors for some opening comments. I'm going to start for District 1, and we're going to go by districts. We try to make all our comments brief here to get to a conversation. But I did want to tell the legislators, thank you for your leadership. I think we've at the county level have trying to show that Monterey County is a leader as well. And when we're giving resources and we're given authority to act to improve the lives of our residents during this pandemic, I think time and time again, we've showed that. When the governor gave us authority to issue a moratorium, we were the first county. The next day, we put it on the agenda for emergency action and approved it. When it came to agricultural workers, we were the first county to push for a PPE, testing, and now priority vaccination for agricultural workers. When the state gave us money for addressing homelessness, our Department of Social Services, Health Department, Coalition of Homeless Service Providers drew that money down. And now we're about to complete the first ever year-round shelter in Salinas, the one in Seaside, And we converted one of our hotels to have 101 units of permanent supportive housing, a partnership with the housing authority, with our local providers. We're showing that we're putting those resources to use when the state provides us that much needed money to get these projects off the ground. And similarly with digital divide, if the state approves a bond or the bills by Lena Gonzalez and Cecilia Aguilar Curry, we are ready to put that legislation to use and resources to use to address those needs for our children, but also for work families and for our seniors that need technology to address and access services more than ever. But we did send a letter yesterday as well, and I think it was addressing some real concerns. And I know my colleagues are going to reiterate this message that as we're trying to implement programs. Last Tuesday, we rolled out and announced our plans about vaccinating those in phase 1B, tier 1, but also our plans to specifically address our largest workforce, our farm workers, agricultural workers. And so we wanted to convey to the community that we're ready. We're ready to go in terms of staffing and sites and plans, but we just need that vaccine. But as we're watching what is happening in other counties, we know that there is a real issue of inequity in distribution of vaccine. Counties with the Kaisers and the Sutters, they seem to be getting a larger share proportional to their population than counties like Monterey that don't have those entities. So there's a real issue of equal distribution there. The other piece is that in the state formula, and I raised this with the co-chief of staff for the governor, Ana Matos Santos, just a few days ago, that the formula does not account for rural areas that have large migrant farm worker workforces. No additional vaccine is taken into account for those counties where in Monterey County, we could have up to 35,000 additional residents during the peak harvest season who come from places like Yuma and Imperial and the Central Valley. And so this is where we thought our state legislators and our federal legislators could really help us with those key issues of manufacturing vaccine and getting it fairly distributed to the counties, because we are seeing, and I think that's a very real issue, of a lack of transparency and having our questions answered from our state leaders. I'm excited that my colleagues have stood up and made these preparations, including joining in legal challenges when our immigrants were under attack under the U.S. Census. They have showed leadership. But we know that in the months ahead, there is a lot more to do. We want to do it together with you. We know that sometimes just getting answers from the California Department of Public Health and the governor's office, it's our state legislators that often get that phone call returned and get those answers more quickly than we could. But I just wanted to convey our partnership and our willingness to do the work locally once you guys are able to provide us those resources that we desperately need. Last point, we had our budget committee meeting just yesterday. We know that the CARES funding was critical for the last year to get through some difficult financial times, but we're already seeing our health department, our RMA departments, they're already looking at deficits in the millions of dollars by not having that next round of federal CARES funding. So I'm glad Congressman Panetta raised that, but that's going to be critical, or else otherwise we are going to be seeing some major deficits in our budget to continue these critical services from now and in through the months ahead. With that, I'm going to go to District 2. Supervisor Phillips, take it away.
Thank you, Luis, and thank you all for being here. I don't have a lot to say because you heard from the county representatives, and the good thing about our county is I think we're all working together on what legislative priorities are important, and all five of us, I think, are together on this. COVID obviously had brought and helped focus attention on the things that we needed to maybe to focus on before, homelessness, housing, the digital divide that Supervisor Alejo has taken the lead on, broadband access. And that's really important in my community out here in North County, that we have such a problem. And I got two of my kids are in teaching, and we see the real problem, and they're trying to carry on their classrooms as they're trying to do it. The state vaccines, I agree with Supervisor Alejo. I don't think it's been equitable. The MCEs, the multi-county entities, the Sutters, the Kaisers, They've been getting more vaccines than we have because they have these. And I know I had to go out of county and join one of these in order to get it. My wife made me go up to Fremont. We sent at least 20 people, 75 or over from our area to other areas, Santa Cruz, other ones, so they could get the vaccine. So it's not equitable, and I think we have to work on that. The idea that our ag workers haven't got as much priority on vaccines and the other things that they should have been done, I think is critical. And even the hospitality people who have been pummeled by this pandemic is saying the first focus ought to be our ag workers because they're critical, and we got to get in and focus on their living conditions. As far as one of the things I think is critical is getting our schools open as soon as we can. And I know we've been talking to Bill Hayward, Michael Freed, who are working with an air filtration system that could improve the atmosphere in the classrooms as well as restaurants. And I think they're talking to the governor about doing that, helping to get indoor dining open, but also getting our schools open in a safe way. And finally, hospitality. I mean, they've just been pummeled by this virus, and we've had our restaurants, indoor dining closed almost forever. And small business relief for them. I think 35% of our restaurants and hospitalities aren't going to open even at this. With that, I want to thank Jimmy Panetta for all the work you've done on Pajaro River for us, and keep moving forward on that. Bill Monning did a great job in stepping in and helping us on the 156 Castroville interchange and dealing with the Santa Cruz salamanders. And one of the things was mentioned, I do think we need to refocus a little bit and maybe have some cleanup legislation on the juvenile process and getting rid of the CYA and bringing in a new agency. But it's really put a considerable burden on our communities on what do we do and where do we house these some young, very dangerous individuals. Where do we safely house those? Do we join with other communities? Does San Benito, Santa Cruz, Monterey County go together on this? It's a lot of work that we got to do. We may need some cleanup legislation to work through that. So with that, I thank you, and we go forward.
Thank you, Supervisor Phillips. We're going to go from North County to South County. Let's go to Supervisor Chris Lopez.
Thank you, Supervisor Alejo. I'm actually going to turn my video off due to the digital divide. And the reason I have to do that is if I don't do that, my audio gets garbled. So I hope that my audio keeps up here. I just wanted to share a few quick comments. I want to thank all of our legislators for participating today, for your support on our legislative platform, not just this year, but in past years. We've worked together to accomplish a lot. In terms of today's major concerns, the equitable distribution of vaccines has to be at the top of the list. And beyond that, the transparency around where the vaccines are going. Right now, there is no dashboard that we can pull up to know where these vaccines are ending up throughout the state. So to trust the process, we need some transparency. And that includes the MCEs and other entities that are receiving large amounts of vaccine that need to be included in these numbers in terms of where they're ending up at the end of the day. Talking about resources, Elaine Howe's audit that came out last week was eye-opening with the 2-to-1 distribution from the state level out to counties. I know that was largely brokered by the governor, but I think moving forward, we need some support. Our small counties are bearing the brunt of this impact due to the fact that our residents are asked to continue to work, right? They're asked to continue to put food on the table of America, and yet given half the amount of dollars per person in our counties versus large counties to help address the outcomes of that request. And that obviously leads into the need for vaccine access. We have a plan in Monterey County in partnership with our agricultural industry, local nonprofits, labor. Everybody's at the table that has an interest, including the farm worker representatives, and we need access to vaccine to help get these people vaccinated. We are prepared to do it. We have the plans in place. We can go within a week if we are told that the vaccine is coming. And I look forward to the day that we can have a conversation about standing those up quickly, and we need your support to get there. The plans are here. They're supported by hospitality. They're supported by residents. We know that these folks have taken the brunt of the impact. I want to quote Janine Chikra, who runs the Portola out in Monterey. She said, "We owe it to these people." And those words struck a chord in my heart, knowing that we've asked these people to keep working, to feed our nation. And now it's time to take care of them, to make sure that as this season ramps up again and more folks come into the area to work, that we keep them safe. So we're asking for a direct allocation for farm workers to help take care of them. We all know that housing drove this pandemic. Just the lack of housing pushed people closer together even at night, and we're asking for any support for future housing efforts as was laid out in the platform. And lastly, actually a couple of brief issues on INSV. I just want to thank everybody for their support. Congressman, Assemblymember Rivas, Senator Caballero, thank you so much for your support in getting some support around this issue that could spread statewide if we don't address it now. And lastly, regarding what we're seeing in the last few days here in Monterey County, disaster relief. I know we touched on it, but also know that infrastructure goes hand in hand. We had a lot of infrastructure give way here in Monterey County, especially in southern Monterey County. It'd be just because of the lack of funding to maintain those. Obviously, this was an incredible storm, but with climate change, as we've all noted is here, these storms are more and more often happening and impacting our communities. We almost had a second flood in Chular the other night, and we were told it was once in a 100-year storm. Well, this is 2 years in a row, and we nearly had them wiped out again. And so we were able to avert that disaster, and we just hope that future opportunities to fund infrastructure that takes into account the climate change and the impact of these storms is considered, and we appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Lopez. Let's go to District 4, the coast of Wendy Rudasky.
Thank you so much. And I just want to thank all of our legislators for spending their time with us today. You're always available when we need you. I know that we can call any one of you personally or reach out to your staff. Your staff are tremendous servants for our community, so please pass our thanks along. I also want to thank my colleagues. I think I can say with confidence that everything that's been stated here this morning, I agree with and I support, and I would second all of those statements. We all are here working for our community. We're here working with shared responsibility to listen to the needs of our constituents and to seek out the voices of those who don't have paid lobbyists in Sacramento or DC, and those who don't have the time to pay attention and attend all of our meetings and reach out or even know who their elected representatives are. So I really appreciate the conversation today and the centering the conversation on the issue of equity, recognizing that those who are most vulnerable and most significantly impacted by this pandemic are not necessarily those who have the ability to navigate the systems that allow them to stay safe, get tested, access the vaccine when it becomes available. So our job as their voices is really to ensure that our systems are set up in such a way that they're meeting their needs. And I just want to, I heard that loud and clear from every speaker today, and I want to say thank you. In addition to some of the things that have been spoken about, I won't repeat them, I'll add on. The impact of COVID on working parents, especially women, has been just unprecedented. I think that recognizing the long-term loss of earnings, the opportunity to contribute to retirement, to contribute to Social Security is going to be something. I think Senator Caballero referenced that there were generational losses of the generational impact of unpaid rent. I think we're also going to experience a similar generational loss of wealth for single parent families and women in general. So I urge you to think and work with the community as we begin to rebuild to try to mitigate some of those very specific impacts. I'm also going to recognize that we do have in Monterey County extremely high rates of homeless students. On the peninsula, we're looking at 16% of our children are McKinney-Vento qualified as homeless. We know that that rate is much higher in Salinas and inland. And we know that in Monterey County, those rates are exponentially higher than what you see anywhere else on the Central Coast. We have many of those students who remain on campus every day with caregivers and teachers. And so ensuring that we find ways to keep that population safe as we move towards a safe reopening of schools and ensuring that high quality childcare is resourced to recover. If we want to talk about how we move into recovery, these are things that we need to continue to have at the forefront of our conversations. A few other things, compassionate and coordinated response to homelessness. This has been an ongoing issue, and the need is clearly growing faster than what we can respond to here locally. People are suffering, people are living on the streets. What we've watched in the numbers of homeless student counts is that families that had previously been living in overcrowded conditions are now moved into vehicles or into hotels. Those who had been in vehicles or hotels are now in shelters or living unsheltered. So as we can see the tide of additional homeless families, homeless children, homeless seniors growing, and it really is the next crisis that I think that needs urgent attention across the board. I do want to call out a few of our Monterey County innovative programs that would be phenomenal. I know you're always looking for pilots and things to highlight as you do your work in Sacramento and DC. We have a phenomenal community health worker program that we're standing up to reach out to our most highly impacted zip codes and census tracts. We've dedicated local dollars to that community health worker program. We have the Esperanza Care program here in Monterey County, where we're providing access to primary health care for our undocumented, low-income, remaining uninsured individuals. It's been a wildly successful program, primarily providing care to women of childbearing age who are our workforce. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity to highlight that and celebrate the success and look at opportunities for expansion. We have a maternal mental health task force in Monterey County that's been doing phenomenal work to expand screening for new families and new mothers. Our Bright Beginnings collaborative is really made tremendous strides in the past, I think, past 10 years. The farm worker quarantine housing that we moved on immediately, I think that's now gained broader attention. And I also want to call out the commitment of the county to stay in communication with our public through a contract to do broadcast communications on COVID-related health and safety issues. Those are things that ideally we would have been able to coordinate, I think, some of those on a broader level, but they are things that the County of Monterey is doing to meet the very unique and specific needs of our community. My colleagues have mentioned that yesterday we sent you a letter urging your attention to some of the unique needs facing Monterey County. And there are a few things I do want to call out specifically from that letter. The county is requesting more transparency in the number of vaccine allocations per county to ensure that we receive our fair and equitable share. The issue, and maybe I've read a lot of information, and it may be that there's a perception, but the reality is if we don't have actual data and information about how vaccines are being distributed and how the formulas are being used, our only conclusion is that if there's a formula being used that doesn't allocate for the 35,000 additional seasonal workers who migrate into our county starting in March, our assumption is that they're not being included and that we are not getting our fair share of allocation for those seasonal agricultural workers. And I also want to emphasize that Monterey County is ready with plans. We have capacity and partnerships in place, and we are ready to distribute the vaccine. We need more vaccine. The only limitation to our ability to distribute vaccine is the actual vaccine. So anything and everything that you can do to raise awareness of the very specific and unique populations that we're looking to get vaccinated here in Monterey County, knowing that we're ready to distribute that vaccine as soon as we receive it, would be appreciated. A couple more points. In addition to vaccines, we're going to continue to need testing for some time. The issue of testing has been a really significant challenge, and the delay in time for testing results to be given continues to be a significant challenge for people. So finding ways to expand and make available rapid testing that can be used by communities, by employers, by schools, I think is something that we're going to continue to need. And I know that there are some regulatory challenges there. I'm speaking personally, this isn't a county position on rapid testing, but it's an urgent one that I think we need to continue talking about. I also want to just mention that our mayors sent a letter asking for farm worker testing as our seasonal agricultural workers be returned to Monterey County. I do believe this is a state health issue, and we're going to need your assistance with additional resources to make that happen. And again, emphasizing that we have just unprecedented support and agreement from our government agencies locally, our industry, across industries, and the public to get testing and vaccines available to our agricultural workforce who have been most significantly impacted by this virus here in Monterey County. It's not common that we find that level of agreement across the board. And I just want to make sure that you know that if that's what you go forward and fight for, like everyone in Monterey County, for the most part, is aligned with that effort. And just recognizing that this has been such a hard year for so many people. I had a loved one text me that they got vaccinated yesterday, and I literally burst into tears. The anxiety level, the stress, the not knowing if people can pay their rent, 500 cars lined up in front of my house every week for a box of food. The needs are so significant and the urgency is so real. And I am just so grateful that we have such a strong local team here in Monterey County and that we have the partnership, your partnership to continue doing this work, to make imperfect progress that meets the very urgent needs of our community. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Supervisor. We're running short on time here. Senator Laird had to jump off as he had another commitment at 12. Let's go to, let's keep this moving at Supervisor Mary Adams. I think Colleen's going to speak, make some comments for her.
Yes, thank you so much. Supervisor Adams needed to leave early. She's meeting with the Sheriff's Department to help respond to the recent natural disasters that happened within District 5. And she'd like me to share with you all her sincere appreciation and gratitude for those of you who represent us at the state and federal levels. She really appreciates your partnership and thank you for being here. A couple of the priorities she would like to have highlighted is addressing the digital divide in Monterey County and to include increased cell coverage, especially down Highway 1 through the San Luis Obispo County line for public safety. To ensure that the migrant farm workers who will be returning to Monterey County as an essential workforce, that they will be included in metrics for vaccine distribution. Knowing that hospitality is the second largest economic engine for the county and especially in District 5, that there's continued advocacy for small business relief, especially for hotels and restaurants. And finally, to continue advocacy for the disaster preparedness, as well as response and recovery. And additionally, just a shared appreciation for the county staff who are on this call and who contributed to the legislative priorities for the county. And just again, thank you to the state and federal members who are here with us today. So thank you.
Thank you, Colleen, for those comments. We're going to go to Supervisor Lopez, who just wanted to make one more comment here.
One final comment. Thank you, Supervisor Alejo. I just wanted to share with our legislators that our South County cities have been leading on the effort to vaccinate farm workers as well. They've helped identify sites and they've been reaching out to me constantly, even through this morning, to make sure, and they wanted me to share with you that they stand with Monterey County's ag workers to be sure that they are prioritizing the vaccine process. And so I just wanted to share with that. I just wanted to share that with you, knowing that their voices matter as well. And they've been extremely loud through this process in fighting for their residents and those folks who help make this valley the salad bowl of the world. And so I want to thank them and just share that comment with you. Thank you, Supervisor.
Thank you, Supervisor Lopez, for bringing that up, because just like the county board of supervisors, our cities have been real leaders. The ag industry, the employers, and the ag associations have been real leaders, and our hospitality have also been very supportive of knowing that in this county we're all in together. And I've appreciated their leadership and that collaboration and partnership, and them also lifting their voices and putting resources forward certainly has to be commended, because we're not seeing that in many other places in California, but our local folks have been true leaders in every sense of the word. So this is an opportunity to have a few minutes for open discussion or responses from our legislators and the supervisors. We want to do that because lastly, we have to give some time to the public if they also want to make any comments on the issues that we addressed today. So if you want to just unmute yourself and join in, try to keep comments brief so we can try to get through a few of them. Anybody? Somebody remember Stone?
No, I think you've heard from us. We've heard from you, and I appreciate the conversation.
Great. All right. I don't see any other hands being lifted. I think we all said what we wanted to say. I'm going to pass this back to our Madam Chair. There she is, back in the chambers to just manage any public comments so we could wrap this up. I know we're at over 2 hours now, but I did want to just lastly thank our legislative team, Annette Diadamo. Sometimes when we got to send out letters, I mean, she's the one crafting those and along with Ashley and Brent getting them out, and just our legislative advocates for really doing a good job. And as our Madam Chair mentioned earlier, our team has to be those voices and address our concerns for our residents that don't have those lobbyists. And that's why we got this team who has been very effective in getting some really good things done for the people of Monterey County. So Madam Chair, I'm going to pass it back to you to handle public comments. Thank you very much.
Lovely. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Supervisor Alejo, for leading us through this meeting. Let's see here. So we have public comment on agenda items today. So I just want to announce that special meetings don't typically include general public comment on non-agenda items. So if anyone has brief comments on items that were discussed as part of the agenda today, we would like to have you raise your hand so that we can go ahead and unmute you. And I'm going to have to ask the clerk for some assistance since my computer just died. Kevin Dayton. We have Kevin Dayton on the line. Kevin, you may unmute yourself and share your comments. Thank you.
Yes, Kevin Dayton here. I'm Government Affairs Liaison for the Monterey Peninsula Chamber of Commerce, Salinas Valley Chamber of Commerce, Salinas City Center Improvement Association. I wanted to thank the county. I love the transcript that is being put up here that you can save. That's a great resource for me to pass to various business and community leaders throughout the county who aren't able to watch a 2-hour video. And I hope you'll be able to post that up promptly on your website, the whole 2 hours. Right now I see just the past hour has been up, but that's a great thing to have. You might even want to consider translating it into Spanish if you can do that without too much cost. Great opportunity for people to be able to see what was said, even if they aren't able to watch the video. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comments, Kevin. And I'm glad that that's a value-added service that's being offered. Antoinette, we have you up next, and we will unmute your microphone for no more than 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. Yes, thank you so much for this opportunity to have a whole bunch of our elected leaders here all together. I am a community member that has been involved at the grassroots level with stopping the homeless sweeps that have been going on in our county. And, you know, I think that just relates so much to a bunch of the things that have come up in different people's presentations. Number one, with regard to the various COVID responses, addressing the needs of the community and the poverty level. I'm not sure how you know that when the biannual homeless survey was not completed and canceled due to COVID. So we don't even know exactly how many unhoused people we have. I can tell you that many of them in Supervisor Phillips's territory, as well as Supervisor Alejo's territory, were flooded out last night at Carr Lake, at Pajaro River, due to the generosity and the tenacity of people at the grassroots level. Funds were raised to find hotel rooms for people, to try to salvage people's things. Our engagement with these people has come on the basis of merely wanting to stop the sweeps, which we suspect CARES money has even been spent on funding. So while I know there's a lot of goodwill in the council, various municipal councils, I want to highlight that people are still falling through the cracks. And, you know, you can pat yourselves on the back, and you should to some degree, but there's much more work to be done and some very real systemic problems here. So that's all the time I need. Thanks.
Thank you. And thank you for joining our meeting today and for sharing your comments, Antoinette. Next up, we have Dr. Bhakta. You may unmute yourself, and we have no more than 3 minutes. Thank you.
Hi there. Can you guys hear me okay?
Dan, you're on.
Great. I wanted to talk for just a minute about reopening schools because I know that's a critical importance to a lot of people, myself included. Just for reference, I'm an emergency physician at CHOMP, and I'm also a board member for the International School of Monterey. There are really 5 pillars of getting schools reopen safety. It's masking and hand washing, physical distancing, ventilation, vaccination, and testing. And I think we've talked about a few of those, but I really do want to focus on getting people rapid tested. The state is talking about sending tests to state laboratories with a 48-hour turnaround time and a whole lot of bureaucracy. I'd like to try and encourage us to look at options for rapid antigen testing locally in our schools that we can run ourselves at a lot cheaper cost and get turned around a lot faster. What I'd like to ask is for the Monterey County Office of Education, as well as the various school districts to investigate this, and then for the health department to help individual schools and districts with a lot of the bureaucracy involved. I, as a physician, just had to jump through a ton of hoops just to get something called a CLIA waiver, which is how you perform these tests and meet the federal requirements. There are some states that have waived that requirement. California has not felt that that was necessary. So essentially, if you want to do these tests, you have to have a physician essentially be in charge. And I'm lucky enough to do this for my kids, but not everybody has that option. But we could really use the help of MCOE and the health department to help us with the reporting requirements, with the bureaucracy, with getting the checks in the box so that we can do the most important thing, which is screen our kids and our staff, make sure we're finding asymptomatic infections, and then keeping those folks out of school so that they don't infect other people, since that seems to be the hallmark of this disease is the pre-symptomatic and asymptomatic spread before people start getting symptoms. What we've discovered is that symptom control and symptom screening are not nearly as helpful as screening these folks with good tests in advance. So I'm asking for the supervisor's help in getting MCOE and MCHD helping all of us to get these programs in place. Thanks a lot for everything you do.
Thank you, Samir. All right, next up we have Wes White. Wes, you have no more than 3 minutes. Thank you for joining us today.
Okay, hi, Wes White, co-president of Salinas Monterey County Homeless Union. Calling in regards, I suppose, to item B on that agenda for homeless. I appreciate the county for saying that they feel the numbers probably increased because that is very likely true. And kind of goes back to the policies. I was hoping the state legislators would still be on the line because it is about the League of Cities and Association of Counties. We have Martin versus Boise, we have CDC guidelines. I mean, people are just getting notices and their property took. Santa Cruz has a lawsuit against them. And we actually got Watsonville to back out from continuing sweeps. Salinas is starting to look sincerely at how they can improve. And Salinas may actually be a landmark ordinance, the possibility. And maybe that's what we need to do is treat people like people, and stopping the sweeps is central to that. We have a homeless union in Sacramento that is constantly under threat and barrage of sweeps. We took them to court, Sacramento City and County, we won. And all they did was change some words, and all of a sudden they can do the sweeps again and clear people's homes. This is affordable housing. And that's the thing. It's not brick and mortar. Affordable housing is whatever people can afford. And I think, we need to focus on that. I mean, we've been so business tops heavy. You know, we separated church and state. Now we need to separate business and state and start focusing on people. This is a public service. And who are we beholden to? Because it seems to be we like to talk about how we're going to do good, but when are we going to do good? Not just feel good for saying good. And I appreciate all the efforts that have been done. I mean, Monterey County is actually leading the way in quite a bit of respects. Coalition of Homeless Service Providers has made leaps and bounds as far as what any other jurisdiction would do. So, you know, for Project Broomkey, you know, they've been state class leaders, and I don't know how to really perpetuate that as policy. It just seems so weird to me that even our own law enforcement would come and just take people's possessions and give them a notice, an eviction notice, tell them they're going to go to jail, and then not show up, you know, because it wasn't official, it wasn't legal. And that's just the mentality, the attitude that we have in positions of authority. And we need to be benevolent, you know, in what we're doing. It just doesn't seem like that's panning out. And as a teacher, what I teach my kids, you know, they're not seeing in the real world. So what ideological conception are they supposed to hold on to in the tangible reality of the society? You know, and bridging that last mile is the whole point of everything. And if we're about humanity, then we need to stop the sweeps and we need to house them. You know, all that money that's being spent throwing away people's possessions. Just throw away the trash. But we need to honor and respect people. Thanks.
Thank you, Wes. Thank you for your comments and for joining us today. I believe Kay Lobo, is that Carla?
Yes, thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak today. I just want to highlight a couple of things that some of my other comrades at the grassroots level has also mentioned, that the sweeps are detrimental not only to the community that you're sweeping, but also the community at large. You're putting community members at risk, not only in the health division of it, but also in the long term. There's a systematic issue going on that at the ground level we see it, but it seems to be overseen by anyone outside of that ground level and the county level. I raise serious concerns with the coalition of homeless service providers and how they're divvying their money and the information that they're receiving from community members. They haven't given community members the opportunity to voice their concerns, what is needed at the ground level, and they completely shut community out in general. And so when you talk about funding and all this money that's come down, we haven't seen it. We haven't seen it at the ground level. We haven't seen it at the provider level as well. So it's very important that we understand that this starts with the process, and the fact that we weren't given the opportunity to be told what the process is when we received this money at the state level, at the county level, and then at the ground level with the service providers, it's a problem. Why can't we know? I want to know data. I want to know where this money is going, and I want to know who's benefiting from this money, because we're not seeing it at the ground level. Communities are coming together because people are becoming homeless, especially during a pandemic. We're putting people homeless. We are causing some of these issues, and yet we are failing to realize where these issues are forming from. So as a community, we need more transparency. We need to know where the money is going. We need to know where and who the money is benefiting and how many people are being benefiting. As we know, the homeless census was canceled. So therefore, we don't know where we stand. We can only go with previous numbers which aren't accurate either. So I ask that we look at this at a deeper level, and we also look at these partners that we claim are helping our community. What are they really doing, and who are they really helping, and where are those numbers to show that they are really helping? Not just counting people, but actually delivering the resources that they need. What is the success rate? Do we have that? How many people have we homed? Turning a hotel room to house 180 people or so is not enough when we have over thousands of people in the Monterey County alone, not to mention children in PUSD. It'd be detrimental if we start taking our children out of the district and lose money that way altogether. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments today, Carla. Next up we have, is it Janine?
Yes.
Fabulous. You have no more than 3 minutes. Thank you.
All right. I'm Janine Chikarat, Chair of the Monterey County Hospitality Association. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Supervisors. First of all, I just want to thank everybody on all levels of government for coming together and for the hard work that's happening. I mean, none of us ever dreamed we'd be facing a pandemic with over and above all the other challenges that we have in our lives. The one thing that we've talked about is the people in need and having to go to the different food banks and the generosity in our community for providing food for those people. And, our industry has added a lot more to that because of the pandemic. And while that alone is tragic, the one thing that no one ever talks about are the families that don't have the money to bury their loved ones. And I'm not sure if there's anything out there that is supporting people to be able to have money to bury their loved ones, but it's a very real issue. For years, I've been in the peninsula and I have personally contributed to help bury people. I've walked into churches with cash in an envelope for them to be able to go over and hand it off to where they're burying them in the cemetery because they wouldn't put them in the ground without the money. So my point today is simply to let's talk about something that's hard, that is something that's very real and something that most people don't want to talk about, and see if there's opportunities to find a way to help people that are seriously hurting besides being hungry. I couldn't imagine not having the money to bury my mother. Thank you.
Thank you, Janine, and thank you for sharing that difficult topic. Next up, we have Aaron Peck. Aaron, you should be able to unmute yourself, and public comment is limited to 3 minutes.
Hi, thank you. My name is Erin Peck. I'm a Monterey County resident. First of all, I just want to thank Wendy. Thank you so much for mentioning things that many other people forgot to mention, especially about us single moms. So as the pandemic continues and the schools are still closed, a lot of us are struggling to survive and struggling to be a teacher, a mother, a maid, a cook. Also, I just wanted to mention something about the $500 CARES emergency fund. And this last week during the incredible storm that we just bared, all those people were left outside, and that should never have happened. That puts people at risk from dying from hypothermia, incredibly high. And I personally witnessed that happen a couple years ago, and it just, I sat at home and I cried about the people that were left outside and not being able to do anything for them. So there needs to be accountability for the funds that are being given out to communities, because people are still suffering, and it's just not acceptable in a state where we're the 5th largest economy in the whole entire world. So I just really think that it's time to be accountable for that, and to stop caring so much about businesses. Well, I mean, of course they're important, but people matter, and without people, there's no business. And people should not have to bear a storm like that ever. So thank you so much for letting me speak.
Wonderful. Thank you for joining us today, Erin. All right, so seeing no additional hands raised, we will close public comment and bring it back to the board and just review any specific board direction to staff today. I didn't hear anything specifically. If there was anything I was missing in terms of specific direction to staff, if any one of my colleagues wanted to speak up now. Otherwise, I think what we will do is to once again thank our legislators for joining us today. I want to thank my colleagues on the board for your leadership, your collaboration, the clarity by which we've been able to develop our legislative priorities and principles, and to be clear in what we're asking and how we would like to partner with our state and federal legislators. I'd like to thank all of our departments and department heads who contributed to our legislative platform. I want to thank our legislative team here at the county, who works so hard to ensure that the needs of our residents in our community are heard loud and clear and represented and included in state and federal legislation. And with that, I will move adjournment, and we will see everyone back here again, I believe on Tuesday. And I will also mention, for anyone who has additional comments or thoughts, you can always email the Board of Supervisors at cob@co.monterey.ca.us. And we do have a homeless workshop scheduled for those of you who were here commenting on homelessness issues. We do have a homelessness workshop scheduled, I believe, for March 2nd. So stay tuned, and we invite you back to continue the conversation.